Narendra Modi, then who could be India's next Prime Minister? This was the title of a recent opinion piece written by noted columnist and senior journalist Tavleen Singh. What took some people by surprise was the fact that Ms. Singh has been one of the prominent voices that endorsed Modi's candidacy before the 2014 general elections and has often praised his vision for governing India. So what has changed? Speaking to us about this is Tavleen Singh. A very warm welcome, ma'am. Pleasure to be speaking with you. The first question is that do you think the perception has changed generally of Prime Minister Modi's government and its performance, or has your perception changed as well?
Well, if it was my perception that had changed, I would have said that, wouldn't I have? I'm not a political person, I'm a journalist, and I attempt to try and reflect what I hear and see on my travels and from meeting people. In 2013, I noticed a wave for Narendra Modi long before anyone in Delhi did, and that's what I reflected. And now I notice a waning of that. So if I wanted to say that my perception of Narendra Modi had changed, believe me, that's what I would have written.
In your observation, what are the causes of this waning of popularity?
Well, I think that, and I've been writing this as well for quite a long time, I think that his chief ministers have let him down. At the state level, whether it's Rajasthan or in Madhya Pradesh, Shivraj Singh Chauhan has done quite well, but I was there a few weeks ago, and there seems to be very strong anti-incumbency. In Uttar Pradesh, I think Uttar Pradesh and Rajasthan, the delivery of what he talked about, Parivartan and Vikas, is not evident on the ground. In UP, we can still give Yogi Adityanath time because it's only been a year. But I think in Rajasthan, it's now nearly time for the next election. And I went to some villages, which I've also written about in my column, in the Barmer, Jaisalmer area, where nothing had changed. And so there was real anger against the chief minister. And now, increasingly, I find that where they used to say, but Modi is fine, people don't say that so clearly anymore.
Do you think that policy decisions like demonetization and GST have greatly contributed to this?
Yes, I'm not sure about greatly because you know, a lot of people that you talk to in villages say, you know, we didn't have any money to lose, so what's to us? But certainly it has affected farmers who were forced to sell their crops for half the price when it happened, when demonetization happened, and small businesses, not just in the villages, but I notice even in the cities, have really suffered because of GST, because it's a very complicated mechanism through which this tax is being collected. So had it been just one flat tax or two, it would have been easier. But they have, you know, I hear from small export businesses that they have to pay in advance a tax, or they've got to pay some sort of, they've got to pay from their very limited profits for something they don't get back for many months. So many people have just closed their businesses. So that is a factor, but I find that more and more at the rural level, what they're saying is they'd hoped that there would be jobs, there would be clean water, there would be much more delivery of public services under Modi than they have seen.
You mentioned that a lot of the anger is directed at chief ministers rather than the Prime Minister himself, though increasingly that may be changing. Do you believe that it is a situation where those around Modi have not done well enough? Because that seems to be quite a popular narrative, that Modi himself has done no wrong, but perhaps those around him have not allowed him to do what he wanted.
Well, you know, that's a very familiar narrative. When there's a popular leader, nobody wants to blame that popular leader for what has gone wrong. But I believe that that I think Modi should have had a political team working with him. He doesn't have a political team. He's got bureaucrats. And when a bureaucrat is very good, so for instance, the Secretary Sanitation, Param Iyer, is one of the finest bureaucrats I've ever seen in my life. And he's worked with real passion for Swachh Bharat. And that you see delivery on the ground. I mean, it was very impressive for me to go to Champaran, I think in April, and see 20,000 young Indians, young rural Indians, gathered there to actually talk about how they're going about their business of trying to change social habits. So, you know, wherever there's been an excellent bureaucrat in charge of a program, it's worked. But the political team should have consisted of MPs. So, for instance, we hear nothing about those model villages he promised. Where are those model villages? You know, I mean, the political team is missing, and bureaucrats never win elections.
It's an interesting point you make, considering that the political team, so to speak, led by Amit Shah, is credited with a huge rise of the BJP over the last 4 years and has led them to form governments in nearly 20 states. So there is something that has been working so far, and perhaps something that has changed now more recently, you think, after the bipolar elections?
No, I think that Amit Shah is an organizational man. He's not a political leader. Without Modi, which state can Amit Shah win? I'm talking about a political team of chief ministers and MPs who can win not just their own seats, but actually influence other seats in their neighborhood. And I don't see that team at all. And that was, you know, that is really a very, very important thing when you get closer to elections. Amit Shah might do very well with enrolling members of the BJP, and he might do very well with making sure that people go out to vote, etc. But I don't see any single state that Amit Shah could win on his name.
But hasn't that been the case with this version of the BJP? Its tallest, biggest and perhaps only political star has been Prime Minister Modi, which is why he campaigns very aggressively for every single election, often bringing the result back from the brink.
Well, that hasn't really happened that much. I think that in Uttar Pradesh, they were ready for a change because they'd been ruled by casteist leaders for 20 years. And when Modi spoke about Parivartan and Vikas, that message to me in the UP election really went through. And I think it was a big mistake, and I've written it often, to put Yogi Adityanath in charge of UP, because I think there's something like 35 seats in UP where a Muslim vote bank, if it votes as a bank, can actually tilt the results. So, you know, you've seen in Gorakhpur and Phulpur and in Kairana more recently that the BJP won last year with a spectacular majority in the Vidhan Sabha, and are now losing, you know, important Lok Sabha seats that certainly Gorakhpur they hadn't ever lost before. So I think they misread the message, and I think that Amit Shah has only a limited role to play. The chief ministers have a much more important role to play, and if they fail, then you lose elections.
Has the message been misread even from the context of the 2014 mandate? You've written before about how growing majoritarianism and a focus on Hindutva ideology has taken away from that promise of Vikas. Do you think that that will backfire eventually, or is there enough of an audience out there for it, which is what we may see in the run-up to 2019? I
don't think that there's enough of an audience for Hindutva. I don't think there is such a thing as a Hindu vote. The Hindus, the upper caste Hindus vote in a particular way, the other backward castes vote in another way, and the Dalits vote differently. And so the only way that you get a Hindu vote is if there's an idea or a leader that is big enough to transcend the fault lines of caste. And that's what happened in 2014. And they did misread the message in Delhi and started this whole business of targeting Muslims without realizing that if you target Muslims, you also target Dalits because they work in the same kind of industries. So that, you know, the big mistakes have been made.
You speak about if not Modi, then whom, and seem to suggest that Rahul Gandhi would not be an obvious choice. So let me put that question to you again. Is it going to turn into a decision coming down to who is the alternative for every voter?
No, it will be a leader who is acceptable sorry, excuse me, across the country. And I don't think that if Rahul Gandhi wins less than 200 seats, that he becomes an automatic candidate. If Akhilesh Yadav and Mayawati manage to win 60 seats in Uttar Pradesh between them, then one of them is a more likely candidate. And I think that, you know, I mean, I've said this before, I don't know whether I've written it or not, but that Mayawati, because she's, you know, from a Dalit family and a woman, would be a credible prime ministerial candidate.
What about Rahul Gandhi? Do you think that there has been a coming of age or a visible change in his leadership skills after taking over as Congress president? He's, of course, tweeting more, speaking more. But do you think that enough has been done to change the perception of him in 2014?
I think that he still manages, and I've written this in the same column that you're asking me about, he still manages somehow to end up being his own worst enemy. So for instance, all that reference to how shikanji sellers became sellers of Coca-Cola and how dhabawalas started McDonald's, that was such a weird reference because actually it was his grandmother who had the most brutal license Raj and who crushed any kind of attempts at enterprise in India for 20 years. That's another thing that I get on the ground. You know, I live quite a lot of the time in Bombay, and I notice that there's a lot of dissatisfaction even at the highest levels of business, although businessmen are usually too scared to speak about it, that his, you know, that the language that he spoke about allowing enterprise to come forward, that he would liberalize the economy so that there would be more entrepreneurship, that he hasn't delivered on that promise. So, you know, I think that there are many reasons that are working against Narendra Modi at the moment.
Just a couple of more points. You spoke about big business and their perception. Usually the worst nightmare for big business, stock markets, etc., is a khichdi sarkar, or you know, a government made of several parties in an alliance of that sort. Do you think the acceptability of that will increase towards 2019, considering it is the only alternative?
Look, I actually have seen only one time when there has been major transformation in the economy, and that was under Narasimha Rao. And he was leading a very weak coalition government. So, you know, we don't know whether that works in the way that you say it does. I don't think that big business necessarily wants a strong leader. They certainly didn't think that Indira Gandhi was doing much for big business, and she was the strongest leader we've had since 1947. Nehru was a very strong leader, and he was very strongly against big business. So what you need is policies that allow business to grow. And we haven't seen those policies in the past 4 years.
What do you think the Modi government could do to stem its waning popularity, which some surveys have also predicted, which perhaps are evidenced in the by-poll results? Do you think there's enough time to turn the tide or stem that waning popularity? We're speaking today less than 12 months before the next general election.
Well, I don't think there can be any dramatic policy changes that would take effect. But I think that he's perfectly capable, Modi. He's a very clever politician of doing something populist, which may not necessarily be very good for the country, either politically or economically, but which could appeal to ordinary people. Now, he thought, I think, that he was doing that when he did this, the gas cylinders and the little bits of transfer of public services to very poor rural Indians. But that hasn't happened on a big enough scale. And unfortunately, he's wasted too much time continuing with huge welfare programs that deliver nothing. Manrega, at the most, one family earns in a year 20,000 rupees, I think. That's the most. That doesn't make any difference. That serves mostly to keep people in poverty. He should have changed that when his instinct told him it was the wrong thing to do, and invested that money in health insurance, in improving hospitals, schools. If that had improved in a single BJP state, schools and hospitals, I mean, he'd be quite undefeatable next year.
Well, thank you so much, Tavleen Singh, for speaking with us and sharing your insights in the political atmosphere as we see it today. Noted columnist and very senior journalist Tavleen Singh speaking about how she perceives the popularity of the Modi government and asking the question that will there be an alternative that is thought about, something which as early as a year ago seemed to be out of the question.
Sir, please believe me, I am in this business.